Good morning. This is Karen Furr, and you are listening and watching Conversations with Karen. And I'm so delighted to have Andrew Steed as a guest today, and we're going to have a conversation about what he does, about Celtic shamanism, and especially about a fire dance and ceremony, an upcoming event that he is doing on behalf of all of us. So thank you and welcome, Andrew. And can you just share a little bit about how you got interested in shamanism and how your path has evolved and
Uh,
where you're from?
yes, thank you so much, Karen, and a real honor and pleasure to be with you today. You know, uh, things start from a very young age, feeling that there was so much more, and it wasn't until I left my homeland and emigrated to the United States that everything came together. However, many things happened prior to that. Uh, in my relationship with fire, it took one of my best friends going into a coma. And when he went into a coma, uh, he was in there for 3 months. And when he died, when he passed into spirit, his parents were very angry. They were angry at him whilst he was alive. They'd kicked him out of the house. They didn't really want to know him. They were very angry at his death and at his friends. And they banned everybody from the funeral. And I didn't feel like I needed to go to that funeral because I knew my friend had passed into spirit, and it would just be a way to agitate his parents, although some of my friends said they were going anyway. What my calling was to light a fire, because I heard a voice saying, light a fire for Paul. And so I lit a fire for Paul. It was at my mum and dad's house, and I realized I needed to keep that fire going all night long. And whilst I was tending it, I was saying goodbye to Paul, and we had dressed up as pirates and gone down to Penzance so we could wander around Cornwall, being the pirates of Penzance. We had so many adventures, and he had borrowed a bandana off me. And I took this bandana and I placed it into the fire and said, Paul, I love you, blessings on your journey. And as I put the bandana in, it hovered above the flames. And I watched as it started to burn around the edges. And then it just kept hovering there. And then whoosh, up the chimney it went. And it was as much to say, Paul had come down and gone, that's mine. And Paul, his full name was Paul King. And I learned recently that Paul, one of the meanings is humble. And as I've grown on a shamanic path, I realized that the humble king took me to the fire to help sing him home that night. And so as I moved to the United States and really delved into the medicine work, it really connected strands from way back into my youth. It kind of took leaving the British Isles for me to really fall deeply in love with the medicine of these isles, because I didn't realize we had it. I didn't realize we came from indigenous stock. And so when I got to the United States and I was interested in the First Nations, the Red Road opened up for me. And in dancing on the Red Road and going to sweat lodges and helping out at powwows and learning the medicine songs of the powwow drum and going down to the ghost dance, the spirit healing dance every year on sacred Cherokee land down in Alabama, what it did was it brought me to a place of connecting with indigenous medicine And then the elders said to me, this medicine is strong. It will carry you well. Your own medicine is stronger. And that made me think, oh my goodness, I come from indigenous stock.
Right. Do you find, as you were developing your understanding of Celtic tradition, that indigenous tradition, did you find a lot of similarities in other indigenous cultures too, like North America or South America or whatever?
Absolutely. You know, an indigenous way is an indigenous way. We may name it something else. It's like the it's like the dragon lines or the song lines. Over here today, they're called the Michael and Mary lines, the ley lines, the older name, the dragon lines. Those song lines, you know, I remember watching a film years ago about a little Aboriginal boy who would sing people to him, and he would sing through the lines, and I was like, I do that. You know, I loved it. It was like, yeah, of course, this is all over the world. We might name it something different, and yet we are connected to the heartbeat of the earth. Just like our stories. I absolutely love stories. And I enjoy reading folklore and folk tales and myths. But you can find the same exact story from Africa in the British Isles. It's just got different animals or different names for the characters.
Right.
The story is the same story.
Yeah. I totally get that. Yeah. I was in a conversation with somebody one time, and they were saying, well, you know, indigenous this versus non-indigenous this. And I found myself saying, we are all indigenous to the planet.
Yeah.
And as we move into this new paradigm, that is what's going to bring us together. Is that understanding that none of us are separate from that indigenous heart, you know. And when I was reading your bio, I thought, oh my gosh, there is Celtic indigenous spirituality, and I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was an awakening. You know, as I say, I had to leave to understand how precious the land is here, and that we have a medicine way. And the beauty of it is it's in the land. If you walk the land here, and I know you have, the land is alive. It sings, it talks. And there are so many nematons, so many sacred spaces that have been undisturbed. And so when you go to these spaces, the energy, when you sing and you connect, and you drum and you dance and you work with the spirits of the land, they are so welcoming. And so I listen to what the land has to say, and the land has been probably my greatest teacher. I also look at and bless the monks, because they scribed a lot of our stories, and they didn't leave any of the juicy bits out. They put everything in. They filled it up. And you've got these amazing stories that, as I have worked with them, and once you get over the difficult names and you actually sink into the story, what I find is that hidden in the spaces between the spaces, they don't actually say, and this is the medicine. You have to find it. But as you explore and you weave, it opens up. I mean, I'll give you an example. In the Second Battle of Moitura, they have a conference for a year and a day up on a hill. And it's a conference of the men of the goddess. And there's 5 of them who gather. but in that 5, it creates the goddess sovereignty. So we know that Lady Sovereignty was there, but also we know that the smith, the healer, and the poet were on the hill. And the goddess of smithcraft, healing, and poetry is Bridget. So Bridget was on the hill.
Yeah.
And what they do for a year and a day is they work Amrun. Now, when I read that, I knew what Amrun was. A lot of people, when I met Joyce, she would call it transfiguration. Amrun is the song that sings me. It's multi-dimensional, and I work Amrun into the dragon lines. I work Amrun into so many spaces.
Can you spell that? So
yes, it's in the olden way. It's AMRUN. Now that's not how it's spelt today, because you have got Old Irish, and now you've got modern Irish, and so hear this piece, because I got a call from a woman in Ireland who asked me if I would be interested in running some retreats at her place called the Songhouse in Donegal. Always wanted to go to Donegal. It's where the Second Battle of Moytura reaches its conclusion. So it's very connected to the wild hunt and the work that I do in the world. And when I went there, I was talking to her about Amrun. And she's like, this Amrun, what is Amrun? And I said, well, it's the song that sings us. And she went, oh my goodness, Auran. She says, you're sitting in Tekna Auran, the house of Amrun.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Isn't that beautiful? It's how
That is
spirit
very beautiful.
carries us into these spaces. Well, what I was going to say there with discovering that one word, it's the only time I've seen it written anywhere in any of the literature, Karen. And most people would, because it's such dense text, would miss it. You gloss over it. The moment I saw it, it was like, that, I know that. And naming it took it to a much deeper space. It was like the ancestors go, yes, this is Amrun, this is the medicine. And whoosh, does it flow through us. Beautiful.
You know, you hit upon an interesting concept for humans. And who knows if other species don't do this? They probably do. But the whole nature or the whole notion of naming, you know, in the Celtic tradition, correct me if I'm wrong on this, there is a singing to the land practice or a naming in the land practice. But it seems like naming helps that, for humans, helps that connection. It helps us relate to, you know, and in a lot of traditions, I know my primary path is Jesus' path, and naming is a big thing in that, you know. Can you talk about that a little bit, and how is that significant in the Celtic tradition, or am I just
Absolutely.
making that up?
We can go to a story. You look at the myths tell us this. If you go to the story of Blodeuwedd and Lugh in the Welsh tradition, when Lugh is born, his mother Arianrhod wants nothing to do with him. And Gwydion, who looks after Lugh, realizes that unless he gets Arianrhod to name Lugh, Lugh won't exist. And so he actually tricks her into giving her son a name. So the power in names, and I love names. I always look when I am out and about. and I meet someone, and I'm like, wow, there's something much deeper happening in this moment. For example, a story I tell quite often. It's a beautiful story, and it connects to the fire, because I was sitting on Slieve na Cariac up in Ireland. Modern name is Loch Crew, and it's the Hill of the Hag. And there's a wonderful burial chamber that is just glorious to go and sing in up there. And I had taken a group up, and we'd sang in the chamber, and I was coming out, and it affords you the most glorious view because it's so high up. Wow. And so I'm looking over Ireland, and I felt eyes on me. And I looked round, and there was a huge man, ruddy face, red hair. And he was so pleased that I'd looked at him, and he came and he sat with me, and we struck up a beautiful conversation. And asked him his name. His name's Tom King. And Tom said to me, I have a gift for you. And I said, well, that's very kind. He says, yes. He says, I've got 2 oak trees for you that were born from acorns from Tara Hill. And Tara is the seat of sovereignty, of oneness, of freedom. It's the place of power. And I was like, wow. He said, do you know the fairy wood? I said, it's my favorite place. He said, well, me and my children picked up those acorns. We've grown them into small trees, and I've got 2 for you. And I said, well, I'm flying home, Tom. I'm not going to be able to take them on the plane. He says, I will look after them until you come and pick them up. Now, Tom is a blacksmith. And I thought it was wonderful that there was a blacksmith and a wordsmith, two us smiths, both connected to the fire, sitting on Slieve na Cariac that day. And he gifted me these 2 trees. Now, the oak tree is the king of the trees. Mm-hmm. Where do I live? The only county that I know of in the whole of the British Isles that's called the Kingdom of Fife. Uh-huh. So I've got these 2 oak kings that I've now brought home that have been planted on the land here in the Kingdom of Fife, in a place that I'm told is also known as a place of the kings, which is Kembach, and Tom means twin. So I got the twin kings from the twin king, from the hill of the king, to bring back to the Kingdom of Fife, to plant in the place of the king.
That is, yeah.
And that's the power of names. And had we not struck up the conversation and swapped the names, but when you do, it's amazing how there's a vibration to a name. Mm-hmm. And so falling in love with the name that we carry, and learning the medicine that comes through because of the names that we work with, it really does carry power.
Mm-hmm. When I was reading your bio, Andrew, you had a couple terms in there that I thought I'm going to ask you about. One was the wild hunt, and yes. The other one was the dragon line.
Yes.
And you've kind of answered the dragon line, the ley lines. You know?
Yeah.
But can you talk about the wild hunt and what that's about?
Yes. Well, it's significant that I'm lighting a fire for the light half of the year. Because the wild hunt happens at the dark half of the year in what the ancients called Samhain. Mm-hmm. And so the ancestors here saw the year in 2 halves. We had a light half and a dark half. And you can imagine going into the dark half in a time where we didn't have electricity, and how are we actually going to get through when you have the appearance of death. Mm-hmm. And so what the ancestors would do is to gather to celebrate death. Because once we fully celebrate death, then we give opportunity for new life to come through. Mm-hmm. And so the wild hunt is an absolutely fabulous gathering, a deep journey where we we work with singing home lost and displaced souls. And so we open up a vortex for those that choose to go. No soul is pushed to go home. They are open to go. And what we find is thousands come, and I'm not just talking human souls here, souls of all beings. They come, and so we sing them home. And the big piece is our own prep work, because we're as hollow bones. Mm-hmm. It's important we create space. And so what we do is we go through our own real deep cleansing to get ready to firstly sing home the souls. But also what we do is we sweep clean the worlds. And so we work just as they did on the hill with the Amrun. So the Amrun is flowing through, and what we are doing is we are literally working with a stick. A lot of people bring a good old broomstick, and we're literally sweeping the worlds clean. And in the ancestral tradition, it was the gods of chaos, the Fomorians, who look to rob prosperity from the world. And so what we do is sweep them off course. We look to sweep away that energy that looks to rob prosperity, so that we can open up a channel for prosperity and abundance to flow in as we stand up for all life. And as well as sweeping and singing home the souls, we're also helping the bone mother, the Kaliak, Bera, Ceridwen, the many names she's known by. We help her pick up the bones of the dead, and we place them in the central fire. It is, I mean, I've had the great fortune, I've led, I believe now it's 25 wild hunts, and each year they go exponentially deeper. It's an absolutely phenomenal practice, very difficult to explain in a short piece, because it is a heart experience, and it's a fire experience. It's outside under the moon, or the rain, or the snow, whatever spirit gifts us that day. It's amazing how often we get clear skies, though, because the compassionate spirits come, and there are so many beings, so many ancestors who come to support that work. So what I'm working with is, normally I would wait until Samhain to do the big piece of singing home so many souls. However, Spirit asked me, and has asked me prior to this on a Celtic celebration day, to light a fire for the light half of the year, and that is May, Beltane, Beltane. And most people today think of it as the 1st of May, because that's a linear concept. However, the ancestors didn't work that way. So what I like to do is work with the moons, the dark moons and the light moons. And so we are coming up upon the light moon of May. And so for 13 hours, I will be tending a spirit fire. And the first piece of that spirit fire, I will open up a vortex where we will invite lost and displaced souls to go home. And so we will sing them home. And then once we've sung them home, I will leave that vortex open, because some will keep on coming. Right. For the 13 hours of the weaving. Mm-hmm. But then I will go into the dragon lines, and I will ride those dragons, and I will be weaving with Amrun, singing all night long the song that sings me. So it's spirit coming through, singing, and it will be 13 rounds. So each round will be dedicated to the earth, the air, the fire, the water, the animals, the plants, the rock beings, and so forth. So it grows in that way. But yeah, that's the Wild Hunt. Traditionally, it's a dark half of the year piece. And so we celebrate it because our dark half of the year happens at that Samhain time. And I've had the great fortune now to wild hunt in 5 different countries, which again, 5 is sovereignty, and it feels so good in my heart.
Now the fire ceremony you're going to be doing on this next full moon. What's the date of that again? Is that May what 8th?
May 6th and
May
7th.
6th and 7th. Okay.
It's because it's a 13-hour fire, and the reason it's 13 hours is because Spirit asked for 13 hours.
And the Spirit asked.
But 13 is the number of transformation, and a couple of years ago, I was asked to light a 13-hour fire in Jamaica to sing home lost and displaced souls, and powering up the lines as I was out there. And when Spirit asked, I said, the people who are coming with me, they won't be able to hold 13 hours of Amrun. And Spirit said they don't need to. You're doing that. They come to the fire, and when they are on empty, they go and they rest. And that's what I say to people, because if they stay, what they will do is suck from the fire. Right. So it's important that it's only when the Spirit song is flowing through us that we are connected in. So yes, the 13 hours is a transformational piece, and I know Spirit has carried me. It carried me in Jamaica, and Spirit will carry me here. But what really helps is people sending prayers in to feed the fire. That and also the connections that people make by lighting candles or hearth fires in their part of the world. So it's at 10:45 p.m. UK time, and I go through to 11:45 a.m. on Thursday, the 7th UK time. So people have to juggle that and figure out what that means in terms of their time zone. But each prayer that is sent in, even if it's a one-word prayer, that one word really does amplify the magic. Because what it does is it puts someone's voice connected to their heart into the fire. And that feeds the dragon lines, and it also feeds Spirit as it's flowing through me. It's amazing how those prayer connections makes such a difference.
Well, yeah, it goes right back to the naming concept. Yeah. We're naming the intention. I know I sent a prayer intention for peace. Yeah. And when I wrote that word down, I created that reality.
Yes.
Yes. Now, are people invited to come be with you, physically with you during that time? Or is this more of a virtual thing?
So this is a very unusual situation for me, Karen, because normally I would be outside under the moon and the stars, and we would be out in nature somewhere lighting a fire and weaving in that way. I'm on lockdown in Scotland. I don't think my neighbours would appreciate me in the garden going through the night because they would hear me. So I am by my hearth fire. And when Spirit asked me to do this, normally whenever I work, I don't allow people to take photographs. Take a photograph at the end of the event when I've let go of Spirit. And I know there's a lot of people who work fire with me who would like to be here and cannot be here. Mm-hmm. So I have set up Zoom. And so I've asked people to make a heart offering, a donation to come in and join me. And if they're called, and some have, and some have said, I'm gonna come for as long as Spirit's singing with me. If it's 13 hours, I'll be with you for the full 13 hours. So there will be people who literally are in my living room with me through technology.
Right.
There will be many, many more who are lighting fires, who are lighting candles, and who will be speaking their prayers to their fire.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they've been gracious enough to furnish me with those prayers so that I can speak them into the central fire. Because as you said, that naming, you know, that piece that you have sent, it goes so deep. And when I speak it into the fire, you know, if 100 people gave me the same word and I speak it 100 times, how beautiful is that?
Honestly.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah.
And I wanted to touch on the fire itself, because Bridget of Kildare, Saint Bridget, she lit a fire, and it was said that she lit a fire that actually was a fire that was already tended prior to her, a fire that was lit for 8, 9, maybe even over 1,000 years before it was extinguished. Yet you cannot extinguish a fire that has lived its life for that kind of time. And so in 1992, when the Brigadine sisters relit the Bridget flame, and they've kept it alight ever since, I've had the great fortune to go and sit with them and light candles from the Bridget flame. And Joyce also gifted me the flame of the peace candle that was with the Dalai Lama's prayers. And so the balance of the masculine and feminine is in the candle which the fire will be lit from. What I love about that is you've got all of the prayers that have been spoken to the peace candle, and all of the prayers that have been spoken to the Bridget fires in that candle that then go into the fire alongside the coals of every wild hunt and every Amran fire that I lead, that I save, that are crushed up. So you've got prayers upon prayers upon prayers. And so it just echoes through the lines.
I love that. I have a second generation Dalai Lama candle, peace candle, that I have treasured forever. You
Yeah.
know, absolutely. So people can join you virtually for this then.
Yes.
If you will email me I know it's on your flyer, but if you'll email me the registration
Yeah.
information, I'll put that on shamanzoom.com when I post and also in the YouTube summary too. I'll make sure that gets in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. That's
How?
wonderful.
Yeah. Now, how far? When you were talking about the dark times and the light times, what I was thinking was Scotland is way up there, so your winters must get dark like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And
Oh,
I mean,
you know,
how
Karen,
much?
my son came to visit. He arrived on the winter solstice the year before last,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, my son's a bit like Tigger. He's full of life, and he was so excited to be here. And he hadn't slept much on the plane. And I got him in the car, and he said, "Okay, Dad," he says, "where are we going to go this afternoon?" I said, "I'm taking you to my house, son." He said, "Yeah." He says, "But then where are we going to go?" I said, "Son, it'll be dark around about 3:30. And he went, "What?" So
Yeah.
he's coming next summer, because next summer I told him, you know, it really doesn't get dark. It
Yeah.
kind of goes purple.
When I was in Scotland, it was in the latter part of May,
Uh-huh.
And the thing that impressed me, I love the sky
Yes.
and I love the night sky.
Yes.
And what impressed me was when I looked straight up, there was the North Star.
Yes.
Now, I'm from Arizona in the United States, and our North Star is maybe 45 degrees,
Right.
and it was just, to me, to be in the Arctic, within the Arctic Circle,
Yeah.
or close to it, or whatever. I was just so moved by the reality that the constant thing that we have is the night sky. But
Yes.
yet in my world, it had shifted.
Yes.
And it kind of invites that deeper reflection on the meaning of life.
It does. I had the great fortune when I was in my 20s. I'm an adventurous soul, and I had wandered around India for about 3.5 months, and then a friend of mine went with me, and we wandered around Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina for around about 3.5 months. And I saw him recently, and we were talking about a time where we thought we had lost out because we rolled die. We were about 19,000 feet above sea level up in the Andes, and we managed to find a ride to take us back down to sea level, and we threw dice to see who would go in the front of the cab, and we lost, which meant we were in the back, and we ended up getting in our sleeping bags, and we lay in the back of this van, and laying in the back of the van, coming down all of the way to sea level, winding down this mountain. You saw the peripheral of the mountain. What you saw was the night sky. And what you were saying there about the North Star and seeing it in a different space, well, in the Southern Hemisphere, it's a total different star formation. And there I am looking at the Southern Cross going, wow, how amazing, and we went to a place called Bariloche in August, and we had a snowball fight. And we were like, this is crazy. But it was such a beautiful remembering of how, when we're in the light half of the year, the southern hemisphere is in their dark half of the year, and it's all connected, and it's all part of a whole. And what a miracle all of that is.
I know. I was in Brazil. This is back in the 90s. And I'm a former nun, and our congregation had sisters in Brazil, and we went to visit. And that is true. And the night sky, I was so disoriented. The Southern Cross was beautiful, and the night sky is beautiful
Yeah,
down there, but it was not the sky I'm used to.
yeah,
And I remember one evening we were out, and I was looking at everybody was talking, and I wasn't interested in what they were talking about, so I was kind of like doing that. And I looked for the Big Dipper and couldn't find it, knowing that it's not there. I was still looking for it.
uh,
That's that yearning for connection to what is familiar.
yes,
And what's just coming to me as I'm saying that is that, you're connecting with your Celtic heritage, that indigenous Celtic heritage. I think for many of us, there is that yearning. There's almost like a holy longing to
yeah,
connect with our indigenousness, and
yes,
our roots, especially, in the northern Western hemisphere, where most of, unless you're indigenous to that part of the country, we're all immigrants,
yes.
and I think there's that yearning for that.
I understand the yearning because in emigrating to the United States, uh, I ended up having a huge yearning for my homeland, and I love, again, it's all spirit led. I was helping an elder at a conference, and a woman walked up to me, and I got in a conversation with her, and I asked her what she did, and she said she led sacred site tours to Greece. And I was like, wow, how amazing is that? And I said, have you ever thought about going to the British Isles? And she said, well, not until now, because I've never had a guide. Will you be the guide? That conversation changed my life, Karen, because in 1999, I walked the land and prepared a pilgrimage. And I've led over 60 pilgrimages to date, taking people in Scotland, Ireland, England, Wales, to the stone circles and the burial chambers and the caves and the waterfalls. So many hidden places, and connecting deeply with the land. Pilgrimage changes people because they meet themselves, because the land is authentic. And of course, as it changes them, it's totally changed me. In going sometimes 2-3 times a year and putting my heart onto the land, and the land in its authentic way asking me to transmute, to shift. And so that yearning to touch the land, I used to, when I was still living in the States, it was getting harder and harder to get on the plane because this was my home. And I know so many people who I've brought over here who, when they step on the land, they go, oh, I'm home. Because a piece of them remembers the connection to this land, and of course to the medicine of this land.
I tell you, when we were in Scotland, we flew into Heathrow in London, drove to Glastonbury, and then drove up to Edinburgh. And we took back roads, but there was we were coming through Scotland, through South Central Scotland. And we came to a crossroads, and it was, just maybe a house or two, the little pottery shop, and just, and I said, we've got to stop the car. And I got out of the car, and it was that same experience that you were just describing. I'm home. This is so familiar. But when we had a day off from what we were doing in outside of Edinburgh, and I went into a shop because I wanted to get a tartan of my family, and there was a map of where the clans were, and there was that town, and I can't remember the town now, but I did, and there it was, and that was my home.
Nice.
That was my ancestral home, and like you said, it was wait, I'm home here, It was just remarkable.
Yes.
Yeah. Now I gotta ask, you seem to have been doing this for ever. What did you do before you started this? Because you started this what in the night?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you have another life?
Well, yes. I went self-employed in 1996. Prior to that, I worked with homeless people. I experienced being homeless myself, and it was in a recession in the British Isles, and I needed work, and I ended up, because if I went prior to that, I've done a lot of jobs. My main job was going on adventures. As my dad said, when are you going to get a proper job? Because it was like, well, I would save money to go on another adventure. But I had my son was on the way, and so it was like, well, I need to get a job, and I had tried to set up a business as a speaker. But it didn't work in those days. It just fell apart. I wasn't ready, and so I was facing homelessness with my son on the way because we couldn't afford to pay the bills. So Mum and Dad said, "Well, come and live in our house, and I managed to get a part-time job that was opening up a day center for homeless people. It was the most amazing job, one of the most difficult jobs I've ever done, because you never knew who was walking through the door. And everybody was welcome every day unless they were disruptive. And then my policy was always, you know, you need to leave now and you're welcome again tomorrow, clean slate. And this was an interesting piece because it was a committee that ran the day center, and they said, you're going to need to provide teas and coffees and some light refreshments. I said, great. I said, I'll work up a price list. And they went, no, Andrew, these are homeless people. They can't afford to pay. And I went, hang on a minute. I said, I'm not talking restaurant prices. I said, there will be an exchange. I said, they will pay for a cup of tea or coffee or a sandwich. And they went, well, what happens if they come in and they don't have any money? I said, you know, some of them will come in drunk. Some of them will come in and they'll be sitting there smoking their cigarettes. I said, some will come and show me their tattoo. I said, of course I'm there to help them. I said, the way I will help them is they will invest. If they have no money, I don't have a problem with that. They can hoover the carpet. They can clean the windows. They can wash the dishes. It was the most amazing thing, Karen. The first day when they walked in and they found out that they had to pay for a cup of tea, there was uproar. We don't have to do this in the night shelter. And I'm like, this isn't the night shelter. This is the day center. There wasn't one fight that broke out in the day center whilst I was running that day center, because what happened was that the people had a real respect. They took some ownership because it was their space. It was a sacred space. It was a safe space. And there was an energy exchange to be in that space, which was a great teaching on many, many levels. But it served me well, you know, that life is, wherever we go, we have much more respect. If someone just gives me something and I don't have an investment, I don't look after it. When I have an investment, then it becomes precious. And when the day center finally closed, because they said, the committee said, well, they don't need it in the summer because it's warm. And I said, it's got nothing to do with it being warm. This is a place of connection, but it was closed. But every person in that day center stood up and gave me and another volunteer, a young man who, when he came to volunteer, I knew him. He was a man that had been in the psychiatric ward, and he was smoking his cigarette, and the ash had grown so long. And I thought, and he was trembling, and he said, I've come to volunteer. And I said, you're so welcome, David. And that man grew as a volunteer. The people at the hospital said, what's happened to David? Mm-hmm. Because he's a new man and he had a purpose. Right. He didn't show up one week. And when he came the next week, instead of mollycoddling him, I had to go. I said, where were you? I said, you didn't show up. Mm-hmm. He said, well, I wasn't feeling like it. I said, then you call and let me know, because we were counting on you. He used to carry the money bag and collect the money for the teas. And he was such a delight to have in there because he found a purpose. Mm-hmm. And for them all to applaud him. I mean, I'll never forget his face. He shone. Yeah. And of course, the people there shone because they grew from being in that space. And so did I.
That's life-changing for people. It really is. What an incredible ministry or incredible work. Yeah. How did that experience influence when you started getting into uh, I guess the more shamanic, shamanistic life, or indigenous pathway. How did that experience influence who you are today?
Well, what I think is, I mean, we are a bunch of stories, and so all of those stories work with us, and looking at the connections and the power of the story. What it did was it helped me to stand on my feet. I remember the first day of opening up the day center. I said there wasn't one fight. There was very nearly one after 5 minutes of opening, because two men got into it. And I remember walking between them and putting my hand on their chest, and their chests were puffed up. And I went, I put my hand and went, stop. And I went, no, go ahead. I said, go on, get into it. I said, because the neighbors here don't want this place open. I said, so you'll do them a favor. And all of the people that are sitting in here will thank you because you got it closed down. So you want to scrap? Go ahead and scrap. And of course, they sat down. But those experiences, I think, have helped me, when I remember, to help me stand with more strength in my power, and also to help assist others. Sometimes I forget all of this, Karen, and when you forget it all, then you have to come back to center. Well, what I found in life is the more you come back to center, the quicker it is to come back to center. And so the teachings, if you like, the elements of that, there was the fire, the earth, the air, and the water in that day center. It just comes in different ways. The fire sometimes came out through people who came in. I mean, I had people who came into that day center so angry. I remember standing in front of one man who had threatened so many people, and I said, "It's time for you to leave." And he went, "Who's gonna make me?" And I said, "I'm here, and I'm telling you, you're gonna leave." And my heart was beating this fast, I'm like, oh my goodness. And he stood there glaring and growling, and then he turned around and walked out, and I was like, wow. And then I turned around, and every other person in the day center was standing right behind me. However,
go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know they were there, and I think what it did is Spirit said, you have to stand and meet that fire with a fire of compassion where you're welcome again tomorrow. But right now, I'm holding space. Yes. And so holding space for those people really has helped me hold space in the work that I do on the world.
That's great. There's a movie. It's called The Bear. It came out, I want to say, in the 90s or maybe late 80s. I'm not sure, but it's an older movie. And in one of the scenes, the little baby bear is running away from a mountain lion or a puma, and he runs out on this branch over a river, and there's nowhere else to go. And the puma is, doing his thing. And the little bear is, just saying, back up, whatever. And the puma kind of just freezes and then turns around and runs away. And then the camera pans around, and there's this huge grizzly bear standing on the bank, We have our help when we call on it.
Well, we do, and that's the beauty is whether it's a wild hunt, whether it's this Amazon fire, this isn't about me, Andrew Steed, doing the work. Because I'm not going to be able to sing for 13 hours. Spirit will. And Spirit will come through me. And it's about opening our hearts, and the more of us who are opening, and the beauty is the more I open my heart, the more I know it opens. You know, it's like as deep as I go, I know I can go deeper. As high as I fly, I know I can fly higher. And so this chamber is opening up, and it's spirit that will carry me to allow this work, and of course the support of it's not just the people who are lighting candles, it's all of their guides. Because you know it's a whole collaborative effort, and the more people that are tuned in and have connected their heart, going back to the prayers, the more prayers that are literally in my hands so that they're spoken, that's what amplifies everything. A First Nations elder sent her prayers in from my ghost dance days. I was so excited to get her prayers.
Wow, that's great.
And she said, Andrew, this is going to be a night to remember. And it brought tears to my eyes. So I thought, yeah, this will be a night to remember. Here in lockdown in Scotland and across the world, people in lockdown. And here we are praying on the evolution of the worlds and being an active participant in that evolution. Yes. And then I thought about what she'd said to me. It's going to be a night to remember.
Right. Yeah.
And as that came home to me, one thing Spirit said when I wrote We Are Children of the Evolution, which actually talks about what we're doing now. It talks about how everything was and is growing. The darkest dark is growing, the lightest light is coming to meet it. And you know, the word war came up, and it was like, that doesn't sit right. And though it felt like they showed me that this is, you know, this is a war, yet it wasn't a war. And I was like, well, how do I speak to the people and share what that is? And then they gave me the answer, and it came through Harry Potter, the Mirror of Erised, the Mirror of Desire. And they said, just reframe it. And I looked at it and went, of course, war became raw, R-A-W, where we remember away, where we reweave away, where we rebirth away. And so that's what we're going to be working with. We're going to be roaring through the night. We're going to remember. We're going to reweave the strands. And we have a chance to rebirth ourselves. You know, this full moon is a real releasing moon. It's a moon of endings. And so when we celebrate the ending, we get a chance to celebrate a beginning. And I've always carried a huge flame of hope, Karen. What my experiences in Jamaica and my experiences working an Indigenous medicine way have taught me is that I moved from hope to knowing. I know we can.
Yes.
I know we can, and it's going to take the collective to know we can. And when the collective wake up to know we can, and we stand shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart, that's the evolution of the world right there.
And I have believed since this pandemic began that this is the invitation that we're given by the universe in this moment of time. That we're in this new paradigm, and remarkably, as tragic as it is, remarkably, we have this opportunity to really, really, really connect.
Yes.
Andrew, is there any question you wanted to answer that I haven't asked yet?
Goodness. I've been so into the conversation. you know, I've really appreciated it. I hope we can do this again because it's
I would like to do
been,
this again.
been,
Yes.
been a whole lot of fun.
Uh,
Uh, I appreciate coming on, and I appreciate you placing this out into the world, and I appreciate everybody who chooses to connect with me. Uh, that's the biggest thing of all. Whether they come on Zoom or not, it's send a one word prayer, because that really is it literally magnifies the medicine. And what you said is in this pandemic, you know, one of the things that Joyce and I talked about, my beautiful partner Joyce, uh, was a 13-hour fire. And she said, well, you know, 5 is sovereignty. You could do a 5-hour fire. And I said, yeah. Spirits asked for 13. And she said, and you could do a 9-hour fire. And I said, yeah, I could. But if I did a 9-hour fire, it would be like 2 o'clock in the morning and I wouldn't be sleeping anyway. I might as well be up lighting the 13-hour fire. And 13 is that transformational piece. And this is what I have to give. And if it's not now, because when things are going our way, when I'm sitting on the top of a hill singing up the sun, you know, when life is going so smoothly, it's much easier to be spiritual. And yet every moment is a spiritual moment. When I'm in the grocery store, when I'm going to a meeting or a class, whatever it is, it's a spiritual encounter. And so this is the most important time when the hits the fan. Mm-hmm. Now is the time to bring our hearts in the biggest way possible. And so where are we going to be on the full moon anyway? We're all on lockdown.
We're not going anywhere.
So light a candle, connect your heart, and let your light shine and your love connect to mine as we roar.
Amen. So if people want to get in touch with you, your website is andrewsteed.com.
It is.
And what is your email address?
It's asteed@andrewsteed.com. Okay. And Steed is spelt like the horse, which is the symbol of sovereignty in the Celtic world. So yes, they can email me at asteed@andrewsteed.com. Look up my pilgrimages and my gatherings and workshops on www.andrewsteed.com. And of course, I've got several books. I've got 6 books out there, all available on Amazon. Beautiful, heartfelt stories, spirit stories, and I'm sure if people choose to invest, that they'll get a lot out of them.
Andrew, I just really honor you. Before this interview or the conversation, I had never met you before. I am so delighted to have had the opportunity to meet you and just be with you for this hour, because I am totally infatuated with the gift that you are bringing and putting into the world in this time of who we are on the planet. I am just so honored to meet you and share with you today. Thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. And I invite anyone who has listened to it, contact Andrew if you have any questions about anything he said today, any comments, and please tune in. The information for the gathering that he is talking about on the 6th, that'll be on shamanzoom.com. When you go onto Shaman Zoom, under recordings, just click on his picture later today, and it'll bring up the recording. But on the right side, if you click on his name, it'll bring up his website for you automatically. But thank you so much, Andrew, and bless you. bless you, especially on the 6th. And let's do this again.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Absolute pleasure. And I also want to thank Joyce, because it
Yes.
was my love, Joyce, who connected me to you. And without that connection, we wouldn't be sitting here today. And what a pleasure it has been speaking with you. And I look forward to speaking again.
That sounds good. Hold on just a second.